The freezing winter sun hung low in the bright afternoon sky when Mason Reed pulled his aging pickup onto the shoulder of a quiet country road. He was already running late for the blind date he never wanted to attend. His stomach was tied in knots, his mind filled with worries about his young daughter waiting at home with a babysitter, and his heart still carrying scars from a past he had spent years trying to survive. The last thing he needed was another complication. Then he saw the woman standing beside a broken-down car. She looked frustrated, exhausted, and completely stranded. Snow from the previous night still covered the field stretching toward the horizon, and cold wind swept across the open road. Cars passed occasionally without stopping. The woman stood alone beside her sedan, staring helplessly beneath the raised hood. Mason hesitated. He had every reason to keep driving. But kindness had become a habit he couldn't break. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of helping strangers, please like this video, comment below where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness for more heart-touching stories. Mason parked behind the stranded vehicle and stepped out. At 38 years old, life had weathered him more than most men his age. Raising his daughter alone after losing his wife 5 years earlier had changed everything. Every dollar mattered. Every minute mattered. Every decision carried weight. Yet somehow he still found himself helping strangers whenever he could. The woman looked relieved the moment she saw him approach. Her name was Ava Sinclair. She explained that her engine had suddenly overheated. She had been driving toward the city for an important appointment and had no idea what to do. Mason listened quietly while examining the engine. Years of working as a mechanic had taught him how to diagnose problems quickly. Within minutes he found a damaged hose that had caused coolant to leak out. It wasn't a major repair. Fortunately, Mason carried spare parts and tools in his truck. As he worked beneath the afternoon sunlight, Ava watched from nearby. She noticed how focused he seemed. How patient. How calm. There was something unusual about him. Most people would have driven past. Many others would have complained about the inconvenience. But Mason simply helped without expecting anything in return. The repair took nearly 40 minutes. By the time he finished, his hands were dirty and his jacket stained with grease. When Ava offered money, he refused. He only smiled and told her to spend it on something meaningful instead. The expression on her face changed. It wasn't often someone treated her that way. Most people saw her expensive clothes and assumed she had everything she needed. Few realized how lonely she actually was. As they prepared to leave, Ava thanked him sincerely. Mason wished her luck and climbed back into his truck. Neither of them knew they were heading to the same destination. Neither of them knew fate had already written the next chapter. The blind date had been arranged by mutual friends who believed both of them needed a fresh start. Mason hated the idea. For months his friends had insisted he deserved happiness again. He disagreed. His daughter Chloe was his entire world. Dating felt selfish. Complicated. Risky. Every failed relationship would affect not only him but also his child. The thought terrified him. Meanwhile, Ava felt equally reluctant. Her successful career had brought financial security but not emotional fulfillment. After years of disappointing relationships, she had stopped believing meaningful connections were possible. Still, she reluctantly agreed to meet this stranger everyone kept praising. Neither expected much. The restaurant sat near a river lined with bare winter trees. Afternoon sunlight reflected off the water as Mason arrived nearly 20 minutes late. He apologized to the hostess and followed her inside. The moment he stepped into the dining room, he froze. Across the room sat Ava. The same woman whose car he had repaired less than an hour earlier. Their eyes widened simultaneously. For several seconds neither moved. Neither spoke. Neither could believe the coincidence. Then realization settled between them. She was the blind date. The blind date he had dreaded all week. Ava laughed first. The tension shattered instantly. Soon both were laughing at the absurdity of it all. For the first time in years, Mason felt his anxiety begin to disappear. The date started differently than either expected. There were no awkward introductions. No forced conversations. No uncomfortable attempts to impress each other. They already shared a story. An unexpected connection created before they even knew who the other person was. As afternoon slowly drifted toward evening, they talked about life. Not superficial things. Real things. The painful things people usually hide. Mason spoke about losing his wife. About learning how to braid his daughter's hair. About working extra hours to pay bills. About sitting alone at school events wishing someone was beside him. Ava listened carefully. She saw strength behind his humility. She saw a man who carried enormous burdens without bitterness. Then Ava shared her own story. Few people knew the truth. Despite her successful appearance, she had grown up in a household filled with emotional distance and pressure. Achievement mattered more than affection. Success mattered more than connection. Over time she built a career but never learned how to build lasting relationships. The loneliness followed her everywhere. For hours they talked. And something remarkable happened. Neither felt judged. Neither felt the need to pretend. By the time they left the restaurant, the winter sky glowed orange above the river. The date had gone far better than either expected. Yet life rarely changes in a single afternoon. The weeks that followed brought challenges. Mason remained cautious. His greatest concern was Chloe. He refused to introduce anyone into his daughter's life unless he was absolutely certain. Ava respected that. She never pressured him. Instead, she allowed trust to grow naturally. Slowly. Patiently. Meanwhile, Mason began noticing small things about Ava. She volunteered at local shelters. She remembered details from conversations. She checked on people when they were struggling. Her kindness wasn't performative. It was genuine. One Saturday afternoon, several months later, Mason finally introduced Ava to Chloe. His daughter was 8 years old, energetic, curious, and fiercely protective of her father. Mason worried constantly about how the meeting would go. To his surprise, Chloe warmed to Ava almost immediately. Not because Ava tried to impress her. Quite the opposite. Ava simply listened. They spent hours drawing pictures in the park, feeding ducks, and talking about books. As Mason watched from a nearby bench, something stirred inside him. Hope. A feeling he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since his wife's passing, he allowed himself to imagine a future that didn't revolve solely around survival. A future that included joy again. But happiness is rarely straightforward. Just when everything seemed to be falling into place, trouble arrived. The small repair shop where Mason worked faced financial difficulties. Business declined rapidly. Within months the owner announced permanent closure. Suddenly Mason found himself unemployed. Bills piled up quickly. Stress returned. Fear returned. The future once again seemed uncertain. Mason withdrew emotionally. He became distant. Embarrassed. Proud. He didn't want Ava seeing him struggle. He didn't want anyone rescuing him. Especially not her. But Ava saw through his silence. She understood what he was doing because she had spent years hiding her own pain behind independence. Instead of offering pity, she offered support. She encouraged him to believe in himself. She reminded him of something important. Every customer who met Mason trusted him. Every family he helped trusted him. Every person who knew him respected him. Maybe losing his job wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. The idea seemed impossible at first. Yet slowly a dream emerged. Opening his own repair shop. A place built on honesty and fairness. A place where customers wouldn't be overcharged or deceived. A place reflecting the values he lived by. The obstacle was money. Starting a business required resources Mason simply didn't have. Months passed. He worked temporary jobs while trying to save every spare dollar. Progress felt painfully slow. Then something happened. Word began spreading through the community. Former customers remembered his kindness. Neighbors remembered favors he had done. Parents remembered him fixing vehicles without charging when families faced hardship. The same kindness he had shown for years started returning unexpectedly. People offered support. Recommendations. Opportunities. Even small investments. One act of kindness after another. Like ripples moving across water. Eventually enough support gathered to make the dream possible. 1 year after helping a stranded woman on a roadside, Mason unlocked the doors of Reed Auto Care for the first time. The grand opening drew dozens of people. Friends. Neighbors. Former customers. Families he had helped. Many came simply to celebrate the success of a good man. Standing among the crowd was Ava. Tears filled her eyes as she watched him cut the ribbon. Because she knew how hard he had fought to reach that moment. And because she knew something else. Mason still didn't fully understand his own impact. He believed he fixed cars. In reality, he restored hope wherever he went. Months later, on another bright winter afternoon remarkably similar to the day they first met, Mason and Ava returned to the same road where her car had broken down. Snow rested lightly across the fields. The sun illuminated the landscape with golden light. Everything looked different. Yet somehow familiar. There, beside the road where fate first crossed their paths, Mason asked Ava to spend the rest of her life with him. No grand audience. No elaborate spectacle. Just honesty. Just love. Just two people who found each other when neither expected it. Tears streamed down Ava's face as she said yes. Not because the proposal was extravagant. But because it was real. Because it represented trust. Healing. Second chances. And the extraordinary power of one simple act of kindness. Years later, whenever people asked how they met, they smiled at the irony. A blind date neither wanted. A broken car. A roadside repair. And a man who stopped to help even when he was already late. The smallest decisions often create the biggest changes. Before we reach the ending, if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, share it with someone special, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness so more people can discover stories that inspire hope and compassion. Glowing star special request, comment below with the words, "Kindness always finds a way," if you believe one small act of kindness can change an entire life. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon that evening, Mason stood between Ava and Chloe, watching the sky turn shades of gold and crimson. Years earlier he thought his story was finished. He believed loss had written the final chapter of his happiness. But life had other plans. A stranger became a friend. A friend became family. And a moment of compassion on an ordinary afternoon became the beginning of an extraordinary future. Because sometimes the blessing you're searching for is hidden inside the interruption you're trying to avoid. And sometimes, the person you least expect to meet becomes the answer to the prayer you stopped believing would ever be answered.